Go. So welcome everyone. We have several members of our board and others that are really have been helpful, and we appreciate your time for coming here today. This is the GRC/ISSO briefing that we run through. Every cohort gets a chance to do this, and they're no different. And every cohort has done it a little differently, and that's very find this as well. And they've done a good job, worked pretty hard at it. So what we're going to do is turn the time over to Cohort Echo. They're going to run through their introductions, and then they're going to circle back and start the briefing. And from your perspective, if when they're finished, we appreciate any questions, technical things you want to dig out, advice, all of that. That's what this is for. It's a learning experience, and all of you that are on here, you've been through it, you know it, and we just appreciate all of your insight that you can share. So please feel free, as usual. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to Kyla, and they'll start the introductions, and then they'll start the briefing.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to attend. I am Kyla Yeke. I am currently transitioning from 5 years of service in the Air Force, and I worked as a logistician. And I'm currently located in Charleston, South Carolina, looking to relocate to Dallas very soon. And I was very excited to join Cybervets and get into cybersecurity because as the world is moving into a technological era, I wanted to challenge myself and get into a field that I know will never run out of need for people. Well, I'm not going to say run out of need for people because they're trying to move into AI, but I think it's very important to have a job that not only allows you to challenge yourself, but you'll never know everything there is to know about it. So that's what really excited me. And again, thank you. And I'm so ready to hear all of y'all's feedback.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Ryan Foster. I am separating in February after serving 8 years in the Air Force as a munitions loader and a nuclear equipment maintainer. I just moved to Alexandria, Virginia from Abilene, Texas, and I love it here. I'm so excited to be here. And I am going into cybersecurity because I really absolutely love to learn new things. Like I consider it a hobby of mine. And I feel like I can constantly learn with cybersecurity. And yeah, that's a little bit about me. Thank you guys for being here. And I'm really excited to present to you today.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Amy Barone. I'm based just north of San Antonio and will be retiring from the Army in February after 26 years as military police. Cybervets has introduced me to a completely new challenge and direction, and I'm excited about everything that I've been learning. I'm transitioning from protecting our nation's physical security to securing the digital front lines. And I'm committing to putting in maximum effort and gain as much knowledge as I possibly can before my retirement. I'm loving it so far, and I look forward to the future. So thank you for attending, and I look forward to hearing your comments.
So now that we've introduced ourselves, are we just jumping into it? Are we ready? Long pause. Okay, cool.
Tell the joke. No kidding.
I let tell the joke.
So we are currently waiting on our slide presenter.
Oh, maybe it should be Shane this time.
Hired.
Wow, JT.
Yeah, so just wanted to let y'all know that
this morning.
we are
One at a
prepared.
time. One at a time.
We are prepared, and we hired this contractor to do our slides, and as of now, he's not meeting our needs. So
You great
Terminate that contract.
He's in default.
and
That
he's
was
at the
awesome.
end. That's crazy.
Oh, I still had it up. Give me a
Yeah,
second.
you need a better contractor. Just gonna throw that.
Yeah,
I
we've been
mean,
talking about it behind the scenes.
that
I don't blame you.
was really good, guys. That was a great icebreaker. Awesome.
You guys are cracking me up over here.
All right, let's try this again.
Okay, perfect, perfect. Alrighty. So I am Kyla Yeke, as I said earlier, and today me, Amy Barone, and Rand Foster will be discussing the analysis, reporting, and tracking system, also known as the ART system, and how to fill the role as an ISSO. Next slide. All right, so we'll also be discussing the system intro, or we'll be discussing the system. We'll be discussing the authority to operate, plans of action and milestones, roles and relationships, and we'll also be discussing privacy impact assessment. Next slide. So what is the ART system? Next slide. Good job, JT. All right, so the ART system is a web-based system that records tracking for a contract business proposal. And a contract business proposal is important in cybersecurity because for cybersecurity, we need to discuss and have it written down, our services, and we need to include this and basically talk about the company overview, services offered, the project timeline, deliverables, and that's going to be important because each individual contract business proposal is going to be tailored to specific needs for the client. So this is going to be hosted by Agency BDC, and Agency BDC is also a type of closed-end fund that makes investments in developing companies. So for this web-based system, another thing that it reports is going to be the deliverables, the workload information for various departments within the agency. And it also contains financial and budget cost-related information in the system as well. Next, we're going to talk about the Federal Information Processing Standard, also known as the FIPS level. The FIPS level is going to be the benchmark for validating any effectiveness of the cytographic hardware of the system. So if a product has a FIPS level 140-2 certificate, basically that just means that you know that it has been tested and formally validated by the US and the Canadian governments. And then lastly, for this slide, we're going to be discussing the component of this system, and the component is going to be contracting. So for that, contractors are going to be responsible for designing, setting up, or configuring any systems that need to meet any security and functioning requirements for that system. So that could be installing hardware, configuring systems, or integrating any various systems for the components. Next slide. So next, we're going to get into discussing the roles and relationships. Next slide. The roles and relationships are going to be very important because it plays a very crucial role in cybersecurity for several reasons. So they have shared responsibility in risk management, as well as diverse expertise and resources. So that just means that the internal and external stakeholders are going to be ensuring that the organization meets any legal obligations. They're also very well versed in compliance and regulatory needs, as well as managing the supply chain security. So the supply chain security is basically the stakeholders are going to make sure that the standards are consistent across all participants. So whether that's going to be with any partners that they have or that they're associated with, third-party suppliers, anything, they're going to make sure that everybody is good across the board. So that way there's no vulnerabilities or any risk within the system. And then lastly, they're going to manage and continue to sorry, I had a brain fart. They're going to continue to make sure that they're working on the incident response plans or business continuity for that system as well. All right, so we're going to get into the important people. So we have the business owner, which is going to be Ray Foster, which you've just met. She's going to focus on the big picture things such as funding, strategic planning, training, anything of that nature. And then she also does the privacy impact assessment annually, and they collaborate with the ISSO. So now that we know about that, we're going to talk about the Chief Information Officer, which is going to be Amy Barone. She's going to oversee the organization's IT and computer systems, which is going to be the information technology that I didn't say, I'm sorry. So basically, they're going to establish and implement IT strategies as well as programs for their line of business. Next is going to be the Information System Security Officer, which is also known as the ISSO. That's going to be me. I maintain security posture of the information system as well as the programs that fall under my line of business. Next slide. So next, we're going to be discussing the Primary Information System Security Officer. That's going to be Miss Sandy. She's responsible for ensuring the security of the control assessor and the contingency planning coordinators and making sure that that's completed. And then it also may work for the federal government or as a contractor. So any Game of Thrones fans in here? I hope so. Next, we're going to go into Chief Information Security Officer, which is the CISO. That's going to be our buddy Tekka. And basically, he's going to focus on developing and leading information security programs, as well as governance, risk, and compliance. And then he also evaluates the risk posture for the system. I know this is a little long-winded, so keep up with me. We're almost done. Next, we're going to talk about the Deputy Chief Information Security Officer. That's going to be Daenerys Targaryen, and she supports the CISO and also helps implement any policies that needed to be implemented. Next slide. So next, we're going to discuss the Information System Security Officer Contractor Support. That's going to be Ronald Reesley, and basically he's going to assist and support the primary ISSO and the secondary ISSO in any roles that they need for the cybersecurity duties. Then we're also going to discuss the System Developer Maintainer. That's going to be Harry Potter, and he performs the vulnerability scanning and penetration testing to assess any risk or vulnerabilities. Lastly, we're going to discuss the Cyber Risk Advisor, which is going to be Hermione Granger, and she's going to be an expert in risk management and compliance, and also analyzes any potential risks to the business or customers and identify any areas of concern. That concludes my portion of the briefing, and I'm going to pass it off to Rayanne Foster, and she's going to discuss the authority to operate. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Kyla. Okay, so today I'm going to be sharing with you guys what an ATO is and how it plays part in the responsibilities of an ISSO. So ATO stands for Authority to Operate. It's a formal decision from an authorizing official confirming that a system or a network meets security and operational standards so that it is approved to operate. The approval process highlights risk management and data protection to make sure that everything is safe and legal. Next slide, please. So for the ART system, the authority to operate status is going to be operational. So it's currently up and running, but it does have the potential to shut down until the currently found business and technical risks are mitigated in the appropriate time frame. I'm going to discuss a list of some of these risks that were found, but I'm not going to go too deep into them because that's going to be Amy's part. So some of the plethora of risks that were found include non-FISMA compliance, mostly in the SQL database. The public trust screening is not performed on employees, so that's a background check and should be done during an onboarding process. There's no alternate processing site, so there's nowhere to continue operations in the event of a failure. Once the threat and risk assessment was conducted, it was found that the architecture is not TRA compliant, and also the outbound emails are all or not TRA compliant as well because they use a third-party mail server to deliver emails. So these risks could affect the business's ability to retain its ATO status, putting the agency's financial information at risk and making action on this high priority. The only controls currently are the POA and Ms, and they detailed vulnerabilities in the system with the risk mitigation plans. Amy's going to go deeper into this later in the briefing. Next slide, please. So now that we know there are risks present, the ATO needs to be put under reauthorization. So as an ISSO, we're going to talk about the appropriate steps. So the first step would be to gather all documentation to get all the information we need to evaluate the system's readiness and compliance with security requirements. So some of this documentation will include the System Security Plan, or SSP. This is a comprehensive overview of the system and its security posture. Another one's going to be the Risk Assessment Report, which is an RAR. This highlights the risk and identifies vulnerabilities in the system. Another one's going to be Plan of Action and Milestones, the POA and M. It's a document of any findings of threats or risks found in assessments along with a mitigation plan. And lastly, you're going to want to maintain the Security Assessment Report, which is the SAR. This is going to summarize the results of control assessments. It helps understand the system and the status a little bit more. So once you've gathered documentation, you're going to want to review the POA and Ms or develop new ones. You want to make sure that's reflecting gaps in compliance and technical risks, maybe even conduct some compensating controls to mitigate the risk temporarily until you find a more permanent solution. If it's not reflecting those gaps, then you're going to want to develop a new one for any risks that cannot immediately be addressed. Now that you've reviewed it, you're going to want to discuss with the partners and stakeholders to make sure that that risk is known and action is being implemented on everyone's part. And then you're going to want to continuously monitor and assess the system to keep a lookout for any threats that may occur while the system is vulnerable. And lastly, you're going to want to continuously work and update the POA and M until all the risks are mitigated and there's a more permanent solution. So I'm now going to pass it on to Amy, and she's going to clarify the POA and Ms and their purpose.
Thanks, Ray. Excuse me. Good afternoon. I'm Amy, and I'll be talking to you about the plans of action and milestones. The POAMs are used to track and manage remediation efforts across an organization. So they bridge the gap between the security standards and the current state with priorities, responsible parties, target completion dates, and milestones for tracking progress. They are a structured approach to risk mitigation and aligning an organization's security posture with compliance requirements and best practices over time. Next slide, please. These are some of the POAMs mentioned in the Information Security Risk Assessment. In the subsequent slides, I'll briefly describe the main ones, highlighting their vulnerabilities, remediation plan, and whether it falls on the technical or business side of the house. Yeah, I'll let you take a quick look and then we'll move on. I hope you're really quick readers. Okay, next slide. Please, thank you. The first is a three-tier architecture. So currently, this and actually the rest of the vulnerabilities that I'll mention today are a moderate risk. After the remediation plan is implemented, the risk will be reduced to low. So the three-tier architecture, also known as multi-zone, divides an application into three separate layers. The presentation layer, which is the front end of the application that the users interact with. It displays the information and sends requests to the application and logic layer. The application and logic layer is the middle layer that processes users' requests and communicates with the database. And then the third and final layer is the data tier, which stores, retrieves, and manages the data the application uses. The importance of the true three-tier architecture is that it provides isolation, a reduced attack surface, scalability and flexibility, defense in depth, compliance, and data protection. So this architecture is not being enforced. Currently, there are only two tiers, and it's presentation and data. So the remediation plan for this is to implement stricter firewall rules or an intrusion detection system at the network level. Ensure the application resides on its own server or on an internal network, sits within the presentation zone and leverages only certain ports, restricting all others via inbound firewall, and uses the least privilege concept. Finally, the intention is to use a security information and event management system, confirming each zone only allows outbound communication to the scene. So this directly involves modifying and securing infrastructure and ensuring proper configuration. It requires adjustments in network design and security controls. Next slide, please. This next poem involves improper email setup. The current configuration uses a third-party server to deliver emails, which is prohibited by the technical reference architecture. The TRA emphasizes using internal trusted resources to control and secure email communication. The remediation is to use approved proxy options like message-oriented middleware, add web servers, or they should be configured to use a trusted internal main submission agent. This technical task requires adjustments in network design and security controls to properly configure the email settings. Next slide, please. The detailed architectural diagram showing the multi-factor authentication does not actually clearly show the MFA integration, and it lacks sufficient detail across different zones, which could obscure visibility into whether MFA is effectively implemented and enforced. So to remediate this, the team should produce comprehensive diagrams that how MFA is applied throughout the system, ensuring that the components and their interactions are clearly defined. Creating architectural diagrams that show MFA integration is a technical task, which requires knowledge of system architecture and how to implement security controls. Next slide, please. The least functionality principle is not enforced in the structured query language database. The SQL database allows features beyond necessary functionality, leading to increased attack surfaces. The remediation is to restrict unnecessary features, permissions, and access, conduct periodic reviews of, and disable any non-essential functions, implement strict controls that ensure only necessary features are active. This requires technical intervention, which involves configuring the database securely by enforcing access controls. Next slide, please. The configuration baseline, the ART SQL server database lacks a documented configuration baseline. So there's no formal standard that outlines how the database should be set up and maintained. This absence creates a risk because there's no standard reference for ensuring that the database structure is consistent, secure, and compliant across the instances. The remediation, obviously, develop and implement a documented configuration baseline, ensuring it aligns with corporate and regulatory standards. This is a technical task which involves ensuring consistent, secure, and compliant database setups. Next slide, please. The final one that we'll talk about is the separation of duties, which is currently not being enforced. So right now, a single individual handles the role of database administrator, application developer, and change manager. So these overlapping roles increase risk of unauthorized change or misuse since one person has access to multiple critical functions. The remediation for this would be to strengthen the process for separating roles and ensure no one individual has conflicting responsibilities or complete control over the critical system functions. So this segregation reduces the risk of unauthorized actions, and enforces accountability. It's also important to conduct regular audits to ensure compliance with the role-based access policy. Additionally, an approval process must be established for any temporary elevated access that might be needed. This ensures that the elevated permissions are only granted with appropriate management oversight and are time limited. Adding an extra layer, the organization ensures compliance and security standards and, of course, reduces risk associated with the access control. Separation of duties is a fundamental business control to prevent fraud, error, misuse. It's a key component in risk management and governance, making it an essential business practice to maintain accountability. While the concept is a business issue, its implementation involves technical measures. Technical teams must design and maintain these controls. So this concludes my portion of the brief on POAMs. I'll be followed by Ray for the final segment.
Thanks, Amy. All right, this is our last topic for today. So if you guys can just stay awake and stay with us a little bit longer, that'd be awesome. So as an ISSO, it's imperative to stay on top of how your system's personal data is being handled. So this is where a privacy impact assessment would come in, or a PIA. So a privacy impact assessment, it's an assessment to ensure that a system collects, stores, and processes personal identifiable information in a safe way that complies with the privacy regulations. So personal identifiable information, or PII, is anything such as your full name, your address, your social security number, information that's personal to you. So the PIA helps system owners determine risks and evaluate protections for handling information, develop new solutions if current methods aren't enough, and making sure that everything is safe and legal when it comes to handling the personal information. I'm also going to talk a little bit about the privacy threshold analysis because I think it comes into play for a PIA. So a privacy threshold analysis, or a PTA, is usually conducted early in a system's development, and it's used to determine whether that system collects, stores, or processes PII, and if a PIA is even necessary. So if the system does process PII, then a full PIA is triggered to assess the risk and compliance steps. Next slide, please. So I put a little example of what a PIA looks like so you guys have a visual, but the current PIA status is that the organization is maintaining compliance, and ART doesn't collect sensitive PII or PHI, but it does follow the least privilege access for contractors, which means that they only have access that's necessary to reduce the attack surface. So ART submits and updates PIA annually in accordance with the agency and the HHS policies. So the HHS policies are the Health and Human Services, which protects the health and well-being of US citizens. The system has a published PIA that's updated every 365 days and only records official contact information from the contractors. Now, this is specific for ART, but other companies may follow different privacy laws or guidelines for processing their PIA. Next slide, please. Now that we know what a PIA is, how do we complete one as an ISSO? So you first want to start with your initial draft, and your system owner or business owner, which would be me, works with the ISSO Kyla to make a draft. And then Kyla would contact the ISSM, the Information System Security Manager, for review. Then we move on to the review and revision step. So the ISSM reviews the PIA with the privacy advisor and coordinates the recommended changes necessary with Kyla, the ISSO. And then we move on to the approval step. So the senior official of privacy, which in this case, we're going to say it's JT, or the designated final approver, which is going to be Shane, they're going to decide if it's appropriate to approve this PIA. And then the senior official of privacy, JT, will designate staff to review PIA before he or she signs. So that staff could be the privacy officer or the data protection officer. And then once they've decided that it's appropriate to sign, they're going to submit the final PIA to the HHS PIA internet site for publication. Next slide, please. So this concludes our briefing. We really appreciate your time. We are Cohort Echo, and if you have any questions, you may ask them now. And if you would like to contact us later, we've put our LinkedIns in here, and please connect with us. We appreciate you coming, and we are ready with any questions you got. Thank you.
Excellent job. Although I do take issue with the fact that you replaced my old band names in for everything for your own thing. So that's cool
They
though.
were all men, Shane.
They
and
were
we're women.
literally, we had to have some women in here for some representation.
All right, so I should have put Fleetwood Mac in there. My bad. No, excellently done, guys. Very well done.
Thank you so much.
Well,